a great resource there. It kind of reminds me of the diamond trade over in Africa. So I mean, it can spiral down to that level of criminality, of gang, and also tribal warfare, but then also this radical Islamic, what if they get control of it? And then now all of a sudden, that becomes an economic boom for them.
Right. You have expressed criticism of President Obama's relationship with Israel, arguing that, quote, since 2009, the Obama administration has shown an unprecedented disregard for the sovereignty of the state of Israel, America's strongest ally in the world. Whether browbeating Israel for building homes in their rightful capital or disrespecting Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House, President Obama has clearly demonstrated that he is no friend of the Jewish state, end quote. Do you also feel that his response to the recent clash between the Israelis and Hamas, the Hamas flotilla, reveals a certain, it's not outright anti-Semitism, but a certain anti-Israeli sentiment that would maybe embolden Israel's and our enemies?
Yes, absolutely. And he has emboldened our enemies, the radical Islamic enemies, from day one. His first interview was Al Arabiya. His first phone call was to Mahmoud Abbas. His trip over to speak before the Turkish General Assembly, where he apologized for us and gave credit to the Muslim world, and then the trip to Cairo, where he made a speech there, bypassed Israel. You look at the fact that right now we have the United States administration that's about to, for the first time, join with the United Nations in condemning Israel. That's something that has never happened. As a matter of fact, the United States was the first country to recognize the state of Israel in 1948. Continue to pressure them about building homes in their rightful capital, which is Jerusalem. And then, of course, this condemnation over the, going in on the Gaza flotilla. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is control of Gaza. Hamas has as part of its charter the destruction of Israel. So, I mean, I don't understand why we would have any leniency toward a terrorist organization that threatens the sovereignty of a state, of the nation state. And you're right, Israel is one of our staunch allies. If the light of Israel is blown out in the Middle East because of the despots, the theocrats, and the dictators that are there, I mean, what does that say about us? So I think this is an awful situation, a terrible situation, and it's very despicable to me the way that the president treats Israel. You look at the difference between when Prime Minister Netanyahu came here and then Mahmoud Abbas comes here. He gets the photo ops. He gets to sit down and everything. This is blatantly in your face, and I really believe that we have a president that is anti-Israel, and maybe at the root core of who he is, there's an anti-Semitism there, which, he hung out with Rashid Khalidi, with Louis Farrakhan and Reverend Wright. So, I mean, those chickens are coming home to roost.
Yes. I want to change tack a little bit. Being a Floridian, the BP oil spill must be that much more personal for you, your neighbors, and the constituents there than it is even for the rest of us. Already we've seen reports of that oil reaching some of your state's gorgeous beaches. How concerned are you about the economic and environmental impact this spill is going to have on Florida?
Well, it's a huge concern. I mean, one of the things about me, I'm a master scuba diver, and I love the beautiful reefs that we have here and the diving that we have here. And a big concern would be if that the oil were to get into the Gulf Stream and come around on the East Coast. But, it comes back to what I talked about earlier. It's about leadership. And, when this incident first happened, it should have been a crisis action team that stood up, the right type of focused experts, deep water experts, deep water drilling platform experts like the ones up in the North Sea. You bring these people in, geophysicists, metallurgical engineers. You bring those folks in, and the number one thing is I want this oil well capped immediately. And then you put up whatever my guys would have been a 10-mile perimeter around that incident site. And that oil spill is contained within that 10-mile perimeter, and you just make sure whatever resources get there. You got to look at this Jones Act that we have. We've got countries that have other resources we can tap into. We should suspend the Jones Act so these countries can come in and help us in our wars.
Yes.
We look at these skimmer boats. I mean, this should have been a dog pile effort. This should have been a main effort for this administration, so that this oil should have never gotten to the beaches. I mean, all this thing about having to do environmental impact studies and research and bureaucratic paperwork and everything of that nature should have gone away. I mean, we should have been building those sand berm barriers out, off the shore, so it could be a buffoon for our coastline. So I don't think that it ever should have gotten to the point where it is right now. And it does threaten the economy here because, this is part of who we are down in Florida with 800, I think 900, maybe like 8,000 miles, I don't know, of pristine beaches that go from, the northwest corner all the way around to the southeast over in Jacksonville. So we've got to protect that. That's who we are. So I think that it comes back to visionary leadership once again to identify crisis situations, start coming up with immediate guidance and also viable solutions. I think that right now the big thing is to be focused on how do we, like I said, immediately contain it and get to the cleanup phase. Stop worrying about blaming. Stop worrying about pointing fingers.
Yes.
Stop worrying about whose butt we're going to kick. Let's get to the point of, saving our environment and making sure that the economic impact of the people there, the fisheries, and the livelihood of the folks is not severely threatened. Then the other thing we got to look at, Marie, you can't just say we're going to have a moratorium on this thing called oil drilling. I think that once you identify what this problem is, which is another thing we should be doing, you got to go back and look at what happened with the fail-safe systems that didn't kick in. We got to make sure we refine our emergency management procedures. But we have got to get to producing and consuming the full spectrum of energy resources for this country so that we're not sending money to Saudi Arabia and to Venezuela and to Mexico. And, China is already talking about coming into, right off 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And if they institute slant drilling, then they come in and start taking the oil resources that we have. So we've got to, sit down and have a very focused, very detailed phase plan to truly make ourselves energy independent. It's not just about oil. It's like I said, it's about the natural gas, the coal, the nuclear, the hydrogen, the Gulf Stream, the electric, solar, wind, the whole thing. But this whole desire to force us into some green energy plan, which what I believe is just going to be talked about tonight, is trying to, now use this as Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think that with cap and trade legislation sitting around, this is going to be an opportunity where they try to sneak that in past the American people. Let's just get this thing capped off. Let's protect our environment and let's move on.
Let's talk about that moratorium. One of the greatest criticisms of Mr. Obama's handling of the oil spill comes from his call for a 6-month moratorium, which regional politicians of both parties have denounced, except for, of course, Florida's Governor Charlie Crist. Louisiana's Governor Bobby Jindal, for one, has stated that, quote, we again ask the president to increase the monitoring of our deep water wells so they do not have to be closed down and cost tens of thousands of our people their jobs during a 6-month or longer process by a government committee that hasn't even been assembled yet. Louisiana people should not have to lose their jobs because the federal government cannot do their job, end quote. And I agree with him so much. Do you oppose the moratorium as well as fear for the impact that it would have on Florida jobs? If so, what other alternatives to the moratorium would you favor to ensure such a disaster never happens again?
Yeah, I absolutely do say that I absolutely am against the moratorium. I got to tell you, Governor Charlie Crist is going to say or do anything to further his own political agenda. He's going to kiss up to anybody. So I think that, when you look at Haley Barbour, Governor Jindal, the governor of Alabama, they got the right thing. I mean, the last thing we need now is to put more Americans out of work. Here in Florida, we got a 12.4% unemployment rate. So we don't need the government creating more victims. We have to be dependent upon them to get more unemployment benefits. We need to keep Americans working. So what I would say is Let's go in and let's start looking at, once again, the emergency management procedures. The things that I've been reading says that somehow maybe a methane gas bubble got into the pipeline and caused that explosion. Well, let's start getting some very smart